So we're going to be continuing with Masechet Chagiga. Yesterday we finished off um, right before Ma'ishna Le'inen Re'iyah, which is the fourth line from the top. And before we yesterday, what we learned, the end of what we learned yesterday was that a person who is deaf but not mute, or a person who's mute but not deaf, is not required to for re'iyah. They don't have to appear, but they are required for simcha. They are required for simcha. Now the Gemara is going to ask, what's the difference between the two? Why are they required for re'iyah, but they're not required for simcha? So ma'ishna le'inyan re'iyah. What's the difference between the case of re'iyah, the pitre, that a mute person is pater, a mute and a deaf, or either a deaf or mute person is pater. U'ma'ishna le'inyan simcha. So what's the difference between the re'iyah and between the simcha, the mechayve, where a deaf or mute person is chayiv in it? So the Gemara answers the Indian re'iyah in the case of appearing, they learn from Gzer Shava, Gemara re'iyah mehakel. You learn Gzer Shava from another mitzvah which is called mehakel. Now mehakel was once every 7 years after the Shemitah cycle. All of Bnei Israel would gather, and the king of Israel at the time would sit in the courtyard and would teach Torah, a certain section in Dvarim actually. But anyways, so we learn from Gzer Shava with Re'iyah, from the Re'iyah that we're dealing with, and Re'iyah with the mitzvah of Lahakel, which means to gather, except it's the mitzvah of Hakel. Dichtiv Hakel et ha'am ha'anashim v'hanashim v'hataf. For it is written in the mitzvah of Hakel, it says, gather the people, the men, the women, and the small children. In the mitzvah right before, Uchtiv bavo kol Yisrael lera'ot, and right before in the previous pasuk, it's written when all Israel comes to appear, lera'ot. So lera'ot appears there, and it appears with re'iyah, lera'ot for re'iyah. So that's what the Gzer Shava is. So now, having established the link between these two mitzvot, we can learn some lessons in one and combine it with the lessons in the other. You can infer for it to each other. So it says hata mila minalan, and there, regarding the mitzvah of gathering, so from there, okay, so they're connected now. But how do we know now that the cheresh is exempt? That a deaf person, or a deaf person who can speak, or a mute person who could hear, a mute person who could hear, is exempt from Hekel. I understand now that you've combined the two, but what lesson are we learning from combining them? So the Gemara answers, Tichtiv leman yishma'u uleman yilmedu. So the Gemara says that in regards to Lahakel, it says that they're going to come in order to hear and in order to learn. And it is taught in a Braita. Laman yishmeu prat lemedaber ve'eno shomea. So in order for them to hear is specifically, it says that phraseology to exclude somebody who cannot hear, who's mute, who's not mute, but he's deaf. So he cannot hear. I don't know the point. So exclude somebody who can speak but cannot hear. Ulaman yilmedu prat l'shomea ve'eno medaber. And it's when it says in order for them to learn, it's talking about somebody who can hear but cannot speak. So the Gemara is going to ask, hey, you're saying that if the Gemara says that they need to learn, that excludes somebody who can hear but can't speak? Are you saying that mute people cannot learn? So that's give me the Gemara's next question. So it's Lememra dechi lo mishta'e lo gamer. So does that mean that somebody who cannot speak cannot learn? V'ha hanhu tre ilme dehavu bishvavute derabi. But there's a story about these two mutes that lived in the neighborhood of of Rebbe, the Rabbi, in Rebbe's community. Bnei Barata de Rabbi Yochanan ben Gedugda, who's the granddaughters of Rabbi Yochanan. Who's the grandsons of Rabbi Yochanan. V'amre le bnei achtei the Rabbi Yochanan. Or some people say that it's the nephews of Rabbi Yochanan. We're not sure if it's his grandchildren or if it's his nephews. The whole Ahmed Dahave Ayel Rabbi Yochanan Midrasha, and it happened that whenever Rabbi Yochanan whenever Rebbe would enter the Beit Midrash, Havu alai v'kamehu, they would enter and they would sit in front of him. Umande bereshehu ve'umarchashin sifvatehu, and they would nod their heads and they would mumble their lips, but they can't speak, they're mute, but they would nod their heads and mumble their lips and listen. Uvai Rabbi Rachme Alehu, and then Rebbe, he prayed for them, he sought the mercy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on them. Tasu, and they were healed. And when they were healed, V'ishtakach Davuv Gemire Hilchata Sifra V'Sifre Chula Hashas. And when they were able to speak, when they were healed, when Rabbi prayed for them, when Rabbi prayed for them, and they were healed and they were able to speak, all of a sudden they found out that they knew halacha, they knew Sifra, which is a commentary on Vayikra, and they knew Sifrei, which is commentary on Dvarim, and they knew all of Shas. They had an understanding of Shas. So clearly, even though they were mute, they still had all this knowledge. They're still able to learn. So then Amar Mar Zutra, Mar Zutra said that it's Kari Bei Leman Yilamedu. So then the Mar Zutra said, yeah, it's written Yilmedu, meaning in order for them to learn. But Mar Zutra says that it's really what it really should be read as in order for them to teach. And somebody who cannot speak cannot teach. So it's really written Leman Yilamedu. It's really read in order for them to teach. That's why they came. And for anybody who thinks that it's actually in order for them to learn and not to teach, and therefore, if somebody actually holds that way, if somebody says that it's yilmedu and not yilamedu, that if somebody holds that they came in order to learn and not in order to teach, that person must hold that since a person cannot speak, he cannot learn. V'kevan de lo shama lo gamar. And since furthermore, in the case of where somebody who cannot hear obviously cannot learn, so what's the point of having both? Why have that in order to come in? Why have in order to come in here and then have it in order to come and teach? Because if somebody who cannot hear, obviously, Lamali Shmoa, he can't hear. Somebody who cannot hear cannot learn either. Because he can't hear, so he can't learn. So why have that redundancy of both? If it's as halim leman yishma'u nafka, so what's the point of that? But that's already comes from leman yishma'u. We already learned from leman yishma'u that a deaf person isn't chayav. We already learned that. So then, what's the point of having leman yelmedu if it comes to exclude somebody who's deaf? That's a redundancy. Eladave leman yilamduhu. So rather, the correct interpretation is that yilamdu, which means that they teach, is because that way the redundancy is cured, so to speak, and it comes to teach a new thing, which is that somebody who is mute cannot come, because a mute person cannot teach. Not that they cannot come; they're not chayavim; they're patur. So now, since we already talking about a gzer shava between Mahakel and our things of Re'iyah, the Gemara now is gonna bring another halachic ruling that we could learn from this comparison. So the Amar of Rabbi Tamchan said, Keresh ve'ozno achas pater min hare'iyah. Somebody who's deaf in one ear is pater from re'iyah. Shneimar be'oznehem. For it is stated in the mitzvah of mehakel, it's stated that they should hear be'oznehem with their ears. So since in Mahakel it says be'oznehem, so therefore using the Gezer Shava, we have to apply that now to Re'iyah because Oznehem is plural in more than one ear. Be'oznehem means in their ears, so you have to have both ears. But then the Gemara challenges this. But he says, but this phrase be'oznehem, v'hai be'oznehem b'baile, but this phrase but we need this phrase be'oznehem to teach be'oznehem dechulu Yisrael. So we need this word be'oznehem to mean whose ears? Bnei Yisrael's ears. So it's not, you can't learn from be'oznehem that you need both ears because be'oznehem is already taken. Be'oznehem is coming to teach us the lesson that Bnei Yisrael, all of Bnei Yisrael, whose ears? Whose ears? Be'oznei dechol Yisrael. It's all talking about all Yisrael. So all Yisrael has to be there. So that phrase is already taken. We already used that to learn something from it. But then the Gemara challenges this. It says, "I men neged kol Yisrael." So if that's the case, you should have learned that from when it says neged kol Yisrael. What it's derived that lesson is from it said neged in front of all Yisrael. So therefore, that frees up the neged kol Yisrael. That frees up the be'oznehem to now. So here's what the Gemara is saying. We wanted to use. Rav Tanchon said that we want to use be'oznehem to teach that you need both ears. But then the Gemara says no. Be'oznehem is coming to teach that is whose ears? Bnei Yisrael's ears. All Bnei Yisrael needs to be there. Then the Gemara says no. You could learn that. You could learn the fact that all of the Bnei Yisrael has to come from the phrase neged kol Yisrael, which is also it's also used when talking about Mahakel. So now we know that neged kol Yisrael teaches in front of all of Israel, which now frees up be'oznehem to be used the way Rav Tanchon wants, which is that you need both ears to be chayiv in re'iyah. So havimina afal gav de lo shami. And I might so even neged kol Yisrael, so we should learn it from in front of all of Yisrael. Hav amina afal gav de lo shami, and I might say that this requirement is meant if everybody is physically present. So it doesn't matter if you could hear, even though if they cannot hear. If you say that it's neged, if you learn that from neged kol Yisrael that all of Bnei Yisrael has to be there, then one might think. Even neged kol Yisrael, if you're going to use the phrase of in front of kol Yisrael, that includes people who can't hear at all. K'tav rachmana be'oznehem. So then the Torah wrote be'oznehem with their ears, v'hu desham'e, which connotes provided that all the people can actually hear. So then again, that phrase is taken. Neged kol Yisrael is taken. No, neged kol Yisrael is not enough. You have to use be'oznehem. So oznehem is taken again. So the Gemara finally says, fine. It says hahu lema'an yishma'u nafka. So that the law is derived from the verse so that they will hear. So fine, we don't learn it from be'oznehem. We learn it from lema'an yishma'u. Great. So now, since Rav Tanchon said this, we're going to go and say, and now we're going to go and have another ruling by Rav Tanchon. It says Amar Rabbi Tanchon. Amar Rabbi Tanchon. Rabbi Tanchon said, if somebody who's injured in one foot, it does not have to go to re'iyah. Shneimar raglaim, because it is written with your feet, feet being plural. But the word raglaim, but the word raglaim is needed to teach something else. It's needed to teach prat the baalei kabin. It's coming to teach people who have a wooden peg for a foot. Rashi explains what does it mean to have To have a lebale kabin, it's somebody whose leg was amputated. So they hollowed out a piece of wood and they would put rags in it, and then they would put their amputated legs into the wood, like a pirate would have a peg. So like these people would have a wooden feet. So having an injured foot is not enough. It has to be an amputated foot, and that's what we use the word raglaim to teach. But then the Gemara challenges this notion that we use raglaim for that. V'ha raglaim baile, but the word raglaim prat lebale. Oh, so then never mind. I already read that. So then the Gemara knocks down this challenge. It says it says hahu mi pa'amim nafka, but we learn that from the word pa'amim, which means, because it says shalosh pa'amim, which means times, but also pa'am means the sole of the shoe. So we learn that from pa'amim, because somebody with a wooden leg doesn't have shoes. The Tani for Rosatna Praita. Pa'amim, when the scripture uses the word pa'amim, ain pa'amim ela raglaim. Even though it literally means the sole of the foot, it really is referring to the feet itself. Pa'amim ain pa'amim ela raglaim. V'chein hu omer tir mesna regel ragle ani pa'amei dalim. It is written. And the foot will trample it, and the feet of the pauper, the soles of the needy. The Omer, and it says further, Ma yafu pa'amayich bet na'alayim bat nadiv. How lovely are the footsteps and sandals, O daughter of the noble. So now the Gemara is just going to say another thing about the we mentioned the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, which says Ma yafu pa'amayich ben na'alayim bat nadiv. So now it's going to go on a little tangent and explain a little bit about something about that pasuk now. Okay, wait. Okay. So just to recap what we said. We said is that we learn that somebody who's lame in one leg is not chayav. The Gemara says no, that's not true. We use that source that they tried to use to teach us that somebody with a wooden leg is not chayav, but somebody who's lame is still chayav. So the Gemara says no. We learn that somebody with a wooden leg is not chayav from the word pa'amim, which means soles of a shoe, because somebody with a wooden leg does not require shoes. And also the Gemara says that in the Braita, whenever the Gemara is referring to the soles, it's referring to feet. And then in that Braita, it brought up a pasuk from Shir Shirim, and now we're going to learn a little bit about that pasuk in Shir Shirim. So Darish Rava. So Rava said, so what is the meaning of the verse that how lovely are your footsteps and sandals, O daughter of the noble? What does that mean, really? What does it mean in Shir Shirim? Kamana in Reglehen Shel Yisrael. So how lovely are the footsteps of Yisrael? B'sha'ab sha'olin l'regel. So what it's coming to teach us is how wonderful are the steps of Bnei Yisrael when they're ascending to Yerushalayim to celebrate the Shalosh Regalim, to celebrate the festival. Bat Nadiv Bitoshel Avram Avinu. So what does the Bat Nadiv mean? The daughter of a noble. So Bat Nadiv is talking about a daughter of Avram Avinu, so the noble is referring to Avram Avinu. Shne'emar Nidve Amim Ne'esfu Am Elohei Avram, for it is stated that the nobles of the nations gathered, the nation of the God of Abraham. So they bring a pasuk which shows that all the nobles gathered to Avram. So it's calling Avram a noble. So when it says Bat Nadiv, it's referring to a daughter of Avram. So now the Gemara has a question though. It says Elohei Avram. So now it says Velohei Avram in the pasuk we just brought. Does that mean that it's the God of Avram and not Yitzchak and Yaakov? Ella Elohei Avram Shaya Tchila Lager. So it says no. It says Elohei Avram because he was the first one to convert. He was the first to convert, the first one to find Judaism, to become a Jew. Great. So now we're going to go back, and so we just stated two things by Rav Tanchum before our tangent about this verse in Shir Shirim. And so And so now we're gonna go back, and right before then, Rav Tanchum gave two rulings, and so we're now gonna go on a tangent again, and we're gonna talk about rulings made by Rav Tanchum, because we're already talking about him. You can say, oh, by the way, he also said this. It says, Amar Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana says, Zarish Rav Natan bar Memuna Menyumi Mishum Rabbi Tanchon. Rav Natan bar Menyumi said in the name of Rav Tanchon, Ma'atziv, what does it mean when it's written Haborek and Wamayim? That when Yosef was thrown in the pit after all of his brothers, they threw him in a pit. It says that the bore is empty and there's no water in it. So what does that mean? I could come to learn that when it says that the pit is empty, shouldn't I induce that there's no water? If it's empty, obviously there's no water. So then the Gemara says, no, it says, Ella Maim Enbo. Rather, it's come to teach us that it's empty only of water. Aval Nachashim ve'akaravim yeshbo. But there are snakes and there are scorpions in it. So when the pasuk says Borek and Bomai, you might think that it's a redundancy, that it's empty and there's no water. But what it's coming to teach us is that the pit was empty of water, but it wasn't empty completely. It was empty of water, but there were snakes and scorpions in there, which is a huge miracle that Yosef was in that pit for an extended period of time, and he wasn't bitten by anything. The snakes and the scorpions left him alone. Anyways, so now we're going to go back to our discussion about Re'iyah now, but it's going to say a story. So it says Tana Rabbanan, the rabbi taught in the Braita, Maaseh Rabbi Yochanan Chimsa. Maaseh Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka Rabbi Elazar Chimsa. Now it says a story about Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka and Rabbi Elazar ben Chimsa. Shehalchu lehakbil pnei Rabbi Yoshua Bifkiin, who went to visit Rabbi Yeshua in Pekian. Amar lehem, Rabbi Yeshua said to them, Ma chidush haya bebeit midrash hayom. So teach me something new that you learned today. Teach me a chidush that you learned in the Beit Midrash today. Amru lo, they said to him, Talmidecha ein anu, umimecha anu shotin. We are your teachers, and from you we drink. We drink from you. We learn from you. Amar lehem, Rabbi Yeshua said to them, Af al pi ken, I efshar lebeit hamidrash below chidush. Even though that you're my teacher's true, and you learned from me true, but you went to the Beit Midrash, and it's impossible to go to the Beit Midrash without coming up with without learning something new. Shabbat shel mi haita. Now whose week was it? Now who taught in the lecture in the Beit Midrash this week? Shabbat shel Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah haita. It was Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's turn to teach in the Beit Midrash. Uvama haita hagda hayom. And so then Rabbi Yeshua asked. He said, and what did you talk about today? What did you teach today? Amulo beparshat Hakel. And so then Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah told Rabbi Yeshua, his teacher, said, we discussed the mitzvah of Hakel, of gathering, which we were talking about before. Uma darashba, and what did you teach about it? Rabbi Yeshua asked. So then they answer, Hakel et ha'am hanashim ve'ataf. The Rabbi Elazar said that it's stated in the pasuk that you should gather everybody together, the men, the women, and the young children. Im anashim ba'im lilmod. So Rabbi Elazar expounds. He says, if the men are coming to learn, nashim ba'ot lishmoa, and the women are coming to hear, taf lama ba'in. So it says that you should gather. They should come in order lishmoa ulilamed. Lilmod. It's in order to hear and in order to learn. So the men are coming to learn, the women are coming to hear. What are the small children coming to do? They're too young to learn or to hear. So then it says, Kidei liten schar lim viehen. So it's in order to give schar to those who bring them. So it's in order to bring schar to the parents. So then the Brisa says Rabbi Yeshua's reaction. So the Amar Lahem, Rabbi Yeshua says, Margali Tova Haita Be'adechem. A precious stone was in your hand. Vikashtem le'adaba mimeni. And you started to withhold it from me, meaning Rabbi Yeshua had to beg them to teach him Torah. Rabbi Yeshua said, what did you learn today? And they were saying, no, you're my teacher, we can't teach you, you teach us. And Rabbi Yeshua had to pull it out of them. So then Rabbi Yeshua says, what are you doing? You had a precious stone in your hand, such a beautiful Torah, and you didn't teach it to me? So now the Gemara is going to go into more stories of Rav Elazar ben Azariah, but we're going to end it here. So Chazak Baruch, and B'ezrat Hashem, I'll see you tomorrow. We'll continue tomorrow with Daf Gimel Amud Bet, starting at the bottom of Daf Gimel Aleph. Chazak Baruch.